Also, a newspaper advice columnist received a letter from an anonymous gay Republican complaining that his friends don't seem to understand and he can be part of a political party seen as hostile to gay people. We'll get into that with our roundtable, including the head of the Log Cabin Republicans, Gregory Angelo. Also joining us will be Michelle Bernard and Sam Stein. Then, 1 in 4 Americans support their state seceding from the United States. Well, they're interesting people. Ron Paul now, that's Rand Paul's father, says that's something we should cheer. Secession. Didn't we go through that in the 1860s? And couldn't that be a problem for his presidential son or hopeful son? Finally, let me finish with this trio of security challenges we face as a country. And this is Hardball, a place for politics. Welcome back to Hardball. Secret Service Director Joy Pearson has resigned, as I said, after a brutal hearing on Capitol Hill. This as Americans absorb the unsettling news that the first ever case of Ebola has been diagnosed here. And gay Republicans in the election season. We get into this story from the perspective of a gay Republican who says he risked losing friends who can't understand how he can be gay and a Republican. Plus, California Governor Jerry Brown in the vanguard again, as always, this time with a new gun law that empowers family members to keep firearms from a relative who may pose a threat. I'm joined right now by the roundtable. Michelle Bernard, the president of Bernard Center for Women, Politics, and Public Policy, Sam Stein of the Huffington Post, and Gregory Angelo, who is executive director of the Log Cabin Republicans and has a lot to explain for himself. Anyway, let's go to Michelle. Michelle, quickly, the Ebola thing. I may be Chicken Little. I don't care, because I've been hearing a lot of comforting words from the president on down. Don't worry, it's unlikely anybody will ever get here. Well, they're here. And I still don't hear how the people in Monrovia at the airport have a plan for finding out if somebody's been in contact with an Ebola victim, as this fellow was. And we now know the system doesn't work. Is it okay to keep it the way it is and live with the numbers and the percentages, or do we have to change it? Your thoughts?
Well, you know, I'm probably going to be the troglodyte on the panel today, Chris, but I've got to tell you, I am terrified of this. I loved hearing Dr. Fauci speak. It is his job to make us feel comfortable and make us believe that this is not going to become an epidemic in the United States, and I hope he is correct. If I were one of the parents of those children in Texas who had been exposed to this person that we now know has the Ebola virus, I would be asking my senator or my members of Congress, basically, should we not be doing something more, and is it possible that we should look at making travel between certain countries in West Africa and the United States a little bit more difficult so that we can protect our shores and make sure that this epidemic doesn't reach us here.
Well, here's the latest from the White House here earlier today. White House spokesman Josh Earnest, who had a little bad day here on the other front, the Secret Service thing where he was out of date, about whether procedures will change to better detect possible Ebola cases coming into the country. Let's watch Josh.
There are protocols in place where those individuals who are leaving West Africa and traveling to the West are screened. There also are screening procedures in place at our border. So as individuals enter the country, they are observed by Customs and Border Patrol and others to protect the broader American public. So there's nothing about this case that we know so far that would indicate any weakness or any flaws in that system right now.
Gregory, are you happy with the way it's working right now as an American? You think that we can go with not zero tolerance and live with the fact there'll probably be some people that come in, but better than sealing off those countries in a more like a containment strategy?
I mean, I'd say it's not time to panic yet. I know that there are Democrats and Republicans from Texas. I know Senator Ted Cruz has been monitoring the situation himself, and I mean, I'm confident that elected officials are doing the things that they need to do to make sure that this situation is being monitored. You know, air travel is terrible enough as it is right now in this country. I don't know that adding more complications to that is necessarily what we need to be doing right now.
Let me go to Sam on this. Sam, it seems to me that there's a long distance between doing hardly anything and panicking. I'm not talking panicking. How about effective control? But I want to go with your larger question. Take 30 seconds on this, okay? Containment. All of a sudden, the president, with for hope and new things, new frontierish kind of stuff, is now playing containment on ISIS, on Ebola, and on not doing stupid stuff at home like the Secret Service. So he's basically in a custodial role politically. It's not very much fun. People aren't going to be thrilled by it. Your thoughts? How's he going to handle this transition to Mr. Keep It Working? It's a big question.
For 30 seconds. I got going. Listen, unless I'm mistaken, none of us on this panel are doctors. So I'm going to put my trust at this point in time in the medical professionals who have said that this disease, while it's clearly deadly, while it poses some significant problems to our health system, can be contained within the American healthcare system. And I trust them, and I have no reason to doubt them at this point. I understand the raw emotions of this whole thing. It makes perfect sense to me. And if I were in Dallas, Texas, I probably would be a little bit concerned. But I think the solutions that we're envisioning or talking about here are pretty drastic, and I'm not sure they can work. If we just shut down flights from Liberia to America, what's to stop someone from flying to Liberia, to France, and then to America? Do we have to shut down all air travel out of Liberia? I mean, there are consequences to every decision and reactions to every decision.
What about a new protocol? When you get on an LL flight to Israel, they've got reasons to do this.
Yeah,
you've probably been through it, like I've been through it, 45-minute interviews. They go through, they wait to see if you sweat, they look to see if any kind of nervousness. Why not something that's a jack it up a bit from what we're doing now? Nobody asked this guy if he was near an Ebola victim. He was carrying one to a hospital. The person died. True. That would be useful information to have.
That's true, and I would say, yes, obviously ask those questions. The problem you run into is that a lot of times people who are carrying the virus don't show symptoms of the virus and aren't really sure that they've been in contact with someone who has the virus.
This guy was.
I'm saying ask those questions.
But
it won't be a fail-safe.
But I mean, isn't the fact alone that you can carry the virus and not show it more reason than not to actually do something a little bit more than what we're doing now? And I'm not saying cut off all air travel. I don't want to. I'm under no circumstances saying that. But we've got to do something more than what we're doing now. This guy, he got into the country. It's
Well, the clear thing to do is to get it under control in the root causes of it, which is Western Africa. And from there, you can sort of work out. I think that makes the most sense.
Let's switch to something else, Gary. Greg, thanks for joining us on the show. I want to get to the gay thing next segment, but I want to get to this thing about Jerry Brown, who I've always been a fan of. Look what the guy did. He's basically saying we got to find a way to get to dangerous people. So you may have a crazy person in your family who has too many guns. You think they might be talking about using them. It could be posse comitatus. It could be any group. Hard right. It could be hard left. It could be anything. Under this new law he just signed, you can go to a judge and say, I want basically a restraining order. This person shouldn't have that gun anymore. You got to take it. And then they can fight it. But at least now there's a procedure for keeping guns out of the hands of people who their relatives know are unstable and dangerous. Your thoughts?
I'm going to tell you, I say bravo to Jerry Brown. There are times where I know the conventional wisdom is that he's a little different or eccentric, but I'll tell you, I am with him there. And already the people, there are people who are saying, oh, this is horrible. It's going to take away the rights of law-abiding citizens. Well, what about the rights of victims? Yeah, well, they had that gentleman out in California last year. His parents tried to get help. They were unable to get help. They could have saved lives. This might put a dent in some instances of domestic violence and a whole sort of other issues in California. Quite frankly, I wish the United States Congress would sort of emulate the work that Jerry Brown
Gregory,
has done.
Michelle,
I'd ask Michelle, would you propose a law to take cars away from alcoholics? I'm looking for more freedom, not less.
I would actually
You wouldn't
do
take
two
the
things.
car keys away from a drunk?
Yeah,
I would take the car keys away. I would put a device on their steering wheel, a breathalyzer, and quite frankly, I do a lot of other things. I would probably take all sex abusers and put them somewhere where they can't get to people either. I think this is important legislation. I want my rights protected.
Gregory's opened up a can of worms. We'll be back with him about how libertarian this guy really is. He's out there serving drinks to the guy on the way out in the car, I guess. Anyway, just kidding. But I'm telling you, drunks shouldn't drive. And you know what? If you have a drunk in the family drives drunk, you better well find a way to keep him out of that car. You don't throw the keys at him. Anyway, Ron Paul says Americans who embrace secession, by the way, are acting in the grand American tradition. Yeah, Jefferson Davis, Robert E. Lee, that's a great American tradition. It's called secession. It cost the lives of 600,000 Americans, the Civil War. And this guy's saying, we got to try this secession thing. Anyway, is he helping his son run for president? I don't think so. We'll be right back.
I don't know exactly how to compare chances from one election to another, but I do think that people are hungry for something more. And I think that we've run good candidates in the past, that have been our nominee, but it hasn't been enough. So I don't think the party is big enough to win again until we become a bigger party, and that means more diverse. That means black, brown, white, young, old, rich, poor. We need more diversity in our party. So that's what I've spent a lot of time is trying to reach out to new constituencies and saying, hey, you know what? Democrats haven't done a very good job protecting your right to privacy. I think Republicans will do a better job.
We're back. That was, of course, Kentucky Senator Rand Paul yesterday in a key presidential primary state of South Carolina. But while Senator Paul has his sights set on 2016, one member of his family might present a challenge to his presidential ambitions. In a column entitled "Scottish Referendum Gives Reasons to be Hopeful," Senator Paul's father, former U.S. Congressman Ron Paul, he was also a presidential candidate, encouraged more secessionist movements here in the U.S. He wrote, quote, "Americans who embrace secession are acting in a grand American tradition. The Declaration of Independence was written to justify secession from Britain. Supporters of liberty should cheer the growth in support for secession, as it is the ultimate rejection of centralized government and the ideologies of Keynesianism, welfarism, and militarism. The growth of support for secession should cheer all supporters of freedom, as devolving power to smaller units of government is one of the best ways to guarantee peace, prosperity, liberty." Well, anyway, back with the roundtable, we got Michelle Bernard, Sam Stein, and Gregory Angelo. Gregory Angelo, you're the executive director of the Log Cabin Republicans, a group of gay Republicans. I've spoken to your group. It's a great group, but still, as the Democratic Party tends to be much more pro gay marriage or same-sex marriage, your party, at least formally, and the voices of its major leaders, is against it. How do you stand?
Well, you know, you started the segment by talking about Rand Paul. I mean, it's important to point out that even Rand Paul, while he might have a position in support of what he would call traditional marriage, is someone who supported the Supreme Court's ruling on Section 3 of the Defense of Marriage Act, and someone who is reaching out to those non-traditional voters that, while other people in the GOP are merely giving lip service to that, he's actually putting those words into action. I'd also point out that, you know, we can talk about this later on and how you can be gay and a Republican.
Well, do it now.
There's shades of gray in the Republican Party. There's shades of gray in the Republican Party. And people are seeing that. You know, Republicans do not walk in lockstep on the marriage equality issue. There are good conservatives who are supporters of marriage equality. And largely in the GOP right now, there's a détente where even opponents of marriage equality see that this is not a winning issue, and they're either not talking about it, or those who are supportive of marriage equality are speaking up because they realize this is a time, this is a historic moment to take a stand.
Sam?
Yeah, so I agree with that. I mean, I think, Greg, I think you're right. Absolutely. There's definitely shades of gray. You see funders in the Republican Party are now trending towards moving LGBT clauses within their party. The problem, and a question for Greg on this, is the party's going to have a platform in 2016, and it's going to outlaw, or it's going to say it's vehemently against same-sex marriage. Unless you have an insight into how you change that, I mean, that seems to be the big problem for you guys.
I mean, you know, like just the difficulty, like I get it, sort of, but you know, there are things about the Republican platform that are good. The belief, I believe, for example, in personal responsibility is a good part of the platform. Yeah. The difficulty, I believe personally, for any member of the LGBT community, quite frankly, for African Americans and for women as well, is how do you remain a part of a party that seemingly does not believe in justice, freedom, and equality for all? It's wonderful that there's somebody in the party that's willing to fight for the rights of the LGBT community.
Michelle,
you've got to fight from within, but I don't know.
I am more
My hat's off to you that you're able to do it.
Well, thanks for the compliment. I'm more interested to see who the party's nominee is as opposed to what the platform says. Focusing on the platform is something that only political wonks and seemingly Democrats seem to be focusing on right now.
In other words, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what your convention agrees to every 4 years. It doesn't matter.
But it does matter because whoever the candidate is, we know at least during the primary season they're going to swing as far right as they possibly can. So the people who love and admire Ted Cruz and other members of the far right will vote for them. That is a danger.
I am more concerned that you are going to have a Democratic Party platform that supports marriage equality. You're going to have a nominee in Hillary Clinton whose position is to the right of everyone in her party. Hillary Clinton believes marriage is an issue that should be settled with the states. That's the same opinion on marriage equality, by the way, that Senator Rand Paul has. Well, so if I was a Democrat, I'd be more concerned with the nominee than with the platform.
And to be fair, I mean, Bill Clinton is the person who signed into law the Defense of Marriage Act. He also instituted the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy. No one is perfect, but quite frankly, at least from my vantage point over the last few years, the Democratic Party seems to be the party that most people are putting forth the rights for all.
I just want to interject one thought that I think all of us grown-ups have differences with the party we may normally vote for. And we all have conflicts. On the issue of abortion, I like Hillary Clinton's stated position to make it rare, safe, legal, and rare. But I don't hear many really policies aimed in that direction. I'd like to see a lot more than that. Okay, let me ask you about this. I want Gregory to start here since he's such a hot ticket here. Let's go with this question. How can Rand Paul defend his father's call for secession, which was the worst thing that ever happened in this country with secession? 600,000 people dead, shooting at each other at point-blank range. Why would he say secession, using that word as a good thing to cheer for in this country?
There was an interview that Ron Paul did with the National Journal where he was able to clarify some of his positions. And he did say that secession is not something that's a reality in this country because when the Civil War occurred, we decided as a nation that we were stronger as a union. I think often what happens with Ron Paul
is that... Well, not as a nation. We had to fight the South. Wait a minute. There was a war. We didn't decide as a nation. 600,000 people were dead deciding that issue. We didn't decide we had a civil war over slavery and whether it could be expanded into the territories or not. That was what the fight was about and why we went to war. So we didn't decide secession's a bad thing. It's unconstitutional. You can't just step out and take French leave from the United States if you're not an angry rural guy in Northern California. You can't do it. So why talk about it if it's unconstitutional?
Well, I mean,
details, Chris. Details. Okay.
Thank you, Sam.
I would suspect that the young Mr. Paul is probably going to have to stay out of this, or at least come out against what his father has said. I think most of the American public will be fine with saying, you know what, everyone's got someone who's a little bonkers in their family, and in this case, it's his father. I mean, for the African Americans that the young Mr. Paul is reaching out to, even the thought of someone saying secession is reasonable is very scary.
I think, Michelle, I think you're being very kind. I think we shouldn't necessarily have to answer to the positions of our relatives. Rand Paul has made the point that Hillary Clinton should be accountable for the discretions of her husband. So by his own standard, I think he is going to have to answer these positions. I don't think he should be tarred with them. But I would like to just make one point. The previous discussion we had was about Ebola. Ebola appearing in the state of Texas. Texas, which is led by a governor, Rick Perry, who has hinted at secession. What are they doing as soon as Ebola shows up in Dallas? They're calling the CDC, the federal government agency, to help them out.
The irony is replete. Every time something goes wrong, we call for Washington.
Exactly.
Sam, you make a strong, cruel point to the subsidiary that's out there. Anyway, thank you so much. A great roundtable today. Michelle Bernard, Sam Stein, Gregory Angelo, who lives in a world of conflict, but so do we all. And we'll be right back.